Hello, everyone. Welcome to Archery Review's live webinar. We are here today to talk about skeleton notes. We're going to spend the next half an hour sharing a great study tool that's going to really help you get NCLEX ready. My name is Shelly Kundick. I am a tutor with Archer Review. I've been with Archer for over 3 years now. I love tutoring students. I love helping you get ready for your NCLEX. I'm streaming on several platforms today, as well as doing this through Zoom. So welcome everyone, no matter where you're joining from. We're glad to have you here. And I'm really excited to share a little bit about a wonderful study tool that you can use as you're preparing for the NCLEX. All right, so as it says on the screen, we're talking about skeleton notes today. This is your shortcut to NCLEX Success. So I just want to start out by talking about what skeleton notes are. We're going to start out with the basics. And so has anyone ever heard of skeleton notes before? Tell me in the chat. Are you familiar with skeleton notes, or is this a brand new concept to you? Just give me a quick little yes, I'm familiar, no, I'm not, and that will kind of help me know I've got a new concept, no, I'm not familiar, it's brand new. Okay, so far, everybody commenting says this is a new concept to you. So that's exciting. I am really excited to be able to introduce something that might be a slightly different study tool. I know sometimes we just get so burned out with studying. We feel like we're doing the same thing day after day after day and nothing's working. And so trying something different might be just what you need to help yourself get NCLEX ready. And if you keep doing the same things, you're going to keep getting the same results. So today, maybe you will learn something a little bit new that will help you approach your studying in a different manner and maybe give you some different results. All right, so let's start with the basics. What are skeleton notes? As a nurse, you hear the word skeleton, you're thinking of a skeleton like I have on the screen, but skeleton notes actually don't have anything to do with the skeletal system. But the word skeleton is significant. Skeleton notes are partially completed notes that provide a structured outline. That structured outline is where we get the term skeleton notes. That structured outline of key concepts with blanks to fill in to help with active learning. So you can look at it as a skeleton note is the bones of the content. It's that structure. It's the basic phrases and terms. It's the headings on an outline. And then as you study and review, you are going to add the muscles and the organs. You're going to add the meat. You're going to add the substance that you need to know for the NCLEX. So think of them as the bones. That's why they're called skeleton notes. This is an example of what a skeleton note might look like. We're going to dive in deeper, so don't worry. I just wanted you to get a visual of what we're talking about. It's basically an outline with the basic headings on there and lots of blanks for you to fill in with the details. All right, so let's discuss those key features. What are skeleton notes all about? Like I said, you have that pre-filled structure. It's basically an outline without the details in it. You have those blanks, those prompts that guide you to kind of know where you need to go and what you need to fill in. One of the big benefits is it encourages active recall. We're going to talk about that more in just a moment. It is very, very useful for reviewing. And one of the reasons it's so useful for reviewing is it helps you identify your knowledge gaps. You can see what you know, what you don't know, and then you can spend your time studying those things that you are struggling with the most. So that's kind of the overall key features. Let's talk a little bit about the key benefits that we get out of using skeleton notes as a study tool. Like we've said already, it focuses on the key concepts. It causes you to have improved retention. It gives you an opportunity basically to brain dump. You are just spitting out everything you know. What do you know about this topic? What are all the details? What is in your brain that you can share and put on that piece of paper? So you are dumping out that knowledge. And dumping out that knowledge is an active form of learning that leads to better retention. It is a guided learning process. It's an active recall learning, which we're going to get to on the next screen, and it helps you find connections. That's one of the things I really love about it because NCLEX is all about connections. Through skeleton notes, you can see those connections. You can see how pathophysiology connects to symptoms, how those symptoms connect to nursing interventions, the nursing interventions connect to medications, those medications connect to patient teaching. It kind of helps you build all of those connections. It helps you find the why behind what you're doing. And we know that's what the NCLEX is all about. You've got to understand the why. Skeleton notes really help mimic the way that you need to think on the NCLEX. So as you can see, there are a lot of amazing benefits about skeleton notes. What do you guys think? Are you ready to learn a little bit more about them and figure out how you can actually develop and build skeleton notes on your own to get that benefit and all those benefits that we just talked about? Okay, before we jump into how to do it, I want to just talk a little bit more about active recall. I kind of mentioned that as one of the big benefits of skeleton notes, but let's talk about active recall in general. It is a great study tool and it's really what we should be using. It's really more of a study method, I should say, than a study tool, and it can be represented in many different study methods. Active recall is when you actively retrieve information from your memory rather than passively reviewing it. So let's kind of talk about what that means. How many of you, when you need to study a topic, sit down, you watch a video, you read the textbook, you look over your notes, and you are just reading? You are just looking and reading. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Tell me in the chat if that is how you typically study. You sit down, you read your notes, and you spend all day reading your notes, and pretty soon you're a little bit brain dead. Your mind is not focusing. You've lost complete focus. You're bored because it is just reading and it is so passive. We can only get so much from that passive study tool. It's a great starting point. Watching that video, watching a lecture, taking notes, highlighting notes is a really good starting point to our studies. But to take it to the next level, you need to do something more active. You need to choose an active recall study method. This is something that's going to strengthen your memory by reinforcing retrieval pathways. Think about the difference. If you sit down and read notes, you're just reading what's on that piece of paper. There's nothing active happening. But maybe if you are preparing to teach that concept to somebody, and you're verbalizing it and you're explaining it, even if you're just teaching it to yourself in the mirror, you are actively recalling that information. That's the difference between passive and active studying. So, what are some other methods of active recall studying that you have used in the past? Throw out some ideas in the chat, something that you have done previously that you think might be included in active recall studying. I talked about teaching other people. That's a great active recall study method. Any other ideas of things you've done? A mock test. Yeah, a practice test is a great active recall. It's causing you to find those answers in your brain and put that information down on the paper. Absolutely. Reading it out loud and explaining it back to myself. I love that. That's a great idea. That explaining helps you actively recall it, helps you put it in your own words. Anything that you do verbally is going to be very, very helpful and is going to be much more active than just sitting and reading. How about flashcards? Do you think flashcards would fit into an active recall study method? Especially if somebody's quizzing you on those flashcards, they read the name of a medication and you tell them everything you know about it. Yes, flashcards are a great form of active recall. Concept mapping. Is that something you guys have done? If not, I recommend that you look that up. We don't have time to review concept mapping today, but it is a fantastic study tool that does a similar thing. It allows that brain dump where you can just spit out everything you know, figure out what you do know and what you don't know. And skeleton notes also fit into this category of active recall study methods. All right, so active recall is actively doing something that helps you remember the information. It strengthens that memory. It helps you find those weak areas and it mimics the way your brain works on test day. All right, so active recall is one study method we want to keep in mind. Another one is spaced repetition. Spaced repetition is when you review material at increasing intervals. So think about when you're studying something. Let's say today you watched a lecture on the nervous system. You remember it pretty good today, right? You finish that video, you look at your notes, and you're like, yeah, I've got it. I've got this figured out. Tomorrow, you're going to remember pretty good. But if you all of a sudden, don't really think about that topic anymore a week from now, how's your memory going to be on that topic? Are you still going to remember 100% of it? What about if you wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month or 6 months down the road? You sometimes feel like you've completely forgotten everything. And you guys probably have experienced that. As you've been studying and reviewing for the NCLEX, you're reviewing back to things that you learned a year or two ago, or for some of you, 10 or 12 years ago in nursing school. And it's hard to bring that information back. And so, if you use a technique called spaced repetition, that means you're going to review something just before you are likely to forget it. It promotes long term memory, it encourages that active recall that we just talked about, and most importantly, it builds confidence. So, this is how active recall works. Each time you review something just before you're likely to forget it, and you're able to space that out a little bit more and a little bit more as you move on. So, for instance, today, like I said, maybe you watched the neuro lecture, so you learned something new today. Tomorrow, you could review your notes. That's going to help set that information a little bit better in your brain. Then, 3 days later, maybe you create skeleton notes, which we're going to talk about here in just a moment. And that's going to be an active recall study method with that spaced repetition, and it's going to help you recall and spit back out that information that you learned. Maybe 7 days later, you pull out those skeleton notes and you use them to teach somebody the topic. 14 days later, 21 days later, a month later, you keep reviewing that topic. You want to keep going at progressively longer intervals. Make sure that you still remember the information, that you're able to recall it, and then review it again a week later, 2 weeks later, whatever that learning curve looks like for you. So if we keep in mind the active recall with the spaced repetition, skeleton notes are the perfect combination. And that's why they can be your shortcut to NCLEX success. All right, they help you review what you know with that active recall brain dump, and it helps you discover your weaknesses so you can go back and review the things that you weren't able to recall as you filled out those skeleton notes. All right, so that is the why behind skeleton notes. That is the why behind why they work and why I recommend them as a study tool. Now let's talk about how to create them. That's why you're all here. You all want a new study tool. You all want a different way to study things so that you can have different results on that NCLEX. So let's talk about how to create your own skeleton notes. The first thing you need to do is pick a topic you want to review. It can be anything. I recommend starting with a fairly narrow topic. If you just say cardio, that could be a 10-page long skeleton note. Break it down into smaller topics, smaller things that you can review. And it could be a system, it can be medications, it can be things like cultural considerations, growth and development, ethical and legal. Any topic that you are working on for the NCLEX can be reviewed through skeleton notes. So your first step is to pick your topic. Second step is to review your lecture slides, your textbook, your notes, whatever information you have on that topic, review it. Figure out what an outline would look like on that topic and start creating that. Now, you can use any medium you want to create those skeleton notes. You can go as simple as a piece of scratch paper and a pencil. You can use markers if you want to make it a little more exciting. You can do skeleton notes on a whiteboard. You can create them on your computer. It is totally up to you to use any medium that works well for you. So just start building an outline. Put those main headings in and leave out the details. And then you're going to put your notes away. You're going to come back to that and you will be filling in those details to see how well you truly understand and know that information. Feel free to put diagrams and charts in those skeleton notes and leave the key points empty. You can use any of those types of tools that you want, and you are just going to fill them in as you go. Keep in mind, skeleton notes, it's a structure. It's the bones of the information. It's a basic outline of what you're reviewing. And then you are going to go back, not using your notes, and fill in the details, fill in the muscles and the organs and the guts of the information. All right, so let's create a few skeleton notes together. Let's pretend that we are studying neuro. We've already talked about that a little bit today. We are going to create a skeleton note on neuroanatomy. Like I said, you want to have it be a fairly narrow topic because it will be a little bit easier to create a one-page skeleton note, and then you can do more pages on other narrow topics. So we have narrowed this down to neuroanatomy. That is the topic that we want to review right now with a skeleton note. So we're going to pull out our notes. We're going to pull out those slides from a lecture. We're going to get our resources pulled together, and we're going to figure out what are those main headings that I would want to include on a skeleton note relating to neuroanatomy. Tell me in the chat, what would you want to include? If you were studying and reviewing neuroanatomy, what would you include? The brain anatomy, absolutely. What else? I've got a couple of hints on the screen with the little diagram I have there. CNS and PNS, absolutely. The cranial nerves, absolutely. Maybe we'd want to get into the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. What about those neurotransmitters that are used throughout the neurological system? Those are the types of headings that we're going to use on a skeleton note to review neuroanatomy. So let's take a look at what that could look like. This is a skeleton note on neuroanatomy, and you can see it has CNS with a couple of blanks to fill in what we know about that. PNS with a couple of blanks, sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic nervous system. It has those major topics that are part of neuroanatomy. So as I'm creating these skeleton notes, this is what I'm going to do. Now this one's nicely typed up. You don't have to type it up that way. Like I said, scratch paper and pencil works great. Just put those headings down, and then you put your notes away, and then you fill them out from your brain the best that you can. All right, let's create another skeleton note. This time, let's use the topic of heart failure. All right, what are some headings we might use when we're creating a skeleton note on heart failure? Tell me in the chat. What are those key points? Flow of blood, absolutely. That would be a really good thing to include in anything cardio, is making sure you know that flow of blood through the heart. Symptoms, yeah, types of heart failure, absolutely. We've got two main types of heart failure. What are they? Two main types of heart failure, left-sided and right-sided, absolutely. So we'd want to list those in our skeleton note. And then we'd want to talk about our assessment findings in left-sided versus right-sided. We know left-sided heart failure primarily affects the lungs. L for left, L for lungs. We're going to have lots of pulmonary symptoms in a client with left-sided heart failure. Right-sided heart failure affects the rest of the body. R for right, R for rest of the body. Symptoms are going to be more related to the organs and edema in the extremities and that sort of thing. So we would want to just put symptoms of left-sided heart failure and symptoms of right-sided heart failure. We'd want to include, oh yes, thank you, great ideas. Diagnostic tests, medications, nursing considerations, teaching points, treatments. Absolutely. Those are all things we would want to include as we create a skeleton note on heart failure. So this is what that might look like. What is it? Heart failure. What is it? What are the causes? What are the types of heart failure? Then we'd list left-sided and have a spot to list out several symptoms. Right-sided, we can list out symptoms, treatment, and education. It's just those main headings that we put on those skeleton notes, and then we are going to fill in the information without using our notes. All right, let's create another one. We've got the topic of magnesium. Skeleton notes are fantastic for electrolyte disorders. It's easy to create those skeleton notes for electrolyte disorders because they're going to be very similar for each electrolyte. So what headings would you want to use if you were creating a skeleton note on, on a magnesium? Any ideas? What would you want to include? The range, the lab range, absolutely. We know that NCLEX typically includes those lab ranges for us, but we want to know those lab ranges as well. So have that lab range on there. Signs and symptoms of hyper and hypo. Excellent. Those are the big things on electrolytes. We're going to look at hypermagnesemia and hypomagnesemia. For both of them, we're going to look at causes, assessment findings, treatments. What are we going to see changing with magnesium levels? We're going to see changes on the EKG, right? We know that can affect that, so we'd want to have that on there. Toxicity symptoms, treatment options. Absolutely. Those are all things we could include on that. For magnesium, it's spilled into 2 pages because we have a bunch on hypermagnesemia and several blanks on hypomagnesemia. Once you create this on magnesium, you could replicate this very easily for calcium, for potassium, for sodium, for all of your major electrolytes and go through the same information. What's the lab value? What are the important findings? What does it look like when it's high? What does it look like when it's low? How do we treat those? All of that information could go on any electrolyte skeleton note. All right, let's create another one. Let's do a topic like restraints. This is a little less physiological than some of the other ones we've talked about. But if we were doing a skeleton note on restraints, what are some topics, headings we might want to include on that? Indications for use, ethical things behind restraints, absolutely. Safety behind those restraints, the types of restraints that you use, nursing care, the different, where you have violent use of restraints, we have non-violent use of restraints. We'd want to talk about what the difference is between those. What types of assessments do we need to do when someone's is using restraints? What documentation is required? Exactly, fantastic. You guys are so on top of this. So yeah, here's an example of what a skeleton note on restraints might look like. It lists on the top one appropriate use, then it says types, nonviolent, violent, documentation, and assessment. And it leaves plenty of space to fill in the details under each of those headings. All right, we're almost out of time, but let's do one more creation of a skeleton note and then I'll pull it all together for you. All right, this one is a medication one. Who loves pharmacology? That's one everybody struggles with, and skeleton notes are a fantastic way to study your pharmacology. So let's do a skeleton note on diuretics. Think about what headings we would want to use on a skeleton note on diuretics. Indications, absolutely. Potassium sparing and potassium wasting, absolutely. Side effects of the different diuretics. You guys are great. These are all things, any medication, any pharmacology related skeleton note is going to have pretty similar headings on it, right? Teaching diseases that it would be used for, contraindications, nursing consideration. Fantastic job, you guys. On a topic like diuretics, I would probably want to throw in a few kind of specific things to get myself rolling in the right direction. I maybe want to include what are the 3 main types of diuretics. Can anyone tell me in the chat 3 main types of diuretics? We've got loop diuretics, potassium sparing diuretics, and what's that third one? Thiazide diuretics. Great job. So those are the 3 main groupings, the three main types of diuretics, I would want to break down the specifics under each of those. I'd maybe want to list a couple of examples of each of them. I would want to make sure I include that common ending that comes with some of our pharmacological agents. So those are all fantastic ideas of what I would include in a diuretic skeleton note. You can see this started out with loop diuretics and then it talked about furosemide. We picked one medication that's very common under that grouping. We went to potassium sparing and we talked about spironolactone. We went to thiazide and talked about hydrochlorothiazide. For each of those, we talked about the common ending, the indication, the action, the nursing considerations. I could take this and almost duplicate it for so many different medications. And so once you kind of think through one good set of skeleton notes for pharmacology, you can use it for everything. And think about how this would help you study. You look at your notes, you make this outline, then you put your notes away and you fill it in the best that you can. And so let's kind of talk about what that looks like just a little bit more as we finish up. You're going to fill it in the best that you can. Be easy on yourself. It is okay if you don't remember everything. And that is the big thing to remember about skeleton notes. It is okay if you don't know everything. You can just, it's supposed to be that way so that it can guide you towards where you need to study a little bit more. So you fill it in the best that you can. And then you go back and you compare what you filled in on those skeleton notes to your actual notes that you took, to the slides from the presentation, to whatever you pulled that information from initially, and you see what you got right and what you got wrong. Stuff that you couldn't fill in. Maybe if we go back to this one on diuretics, maybe you did really good with the loop diuretics and the potassium sparing diuretics, but you just couldn't quite remember those thiazide diuretics and what was different about them. That's okay. As you go back to your notes, maybe use a red pen to fill it in and fill in the stuff that you didn't get in the first time with a different color. And then you know that's what you need to study. You know, okay, I did really good with those first kinds of diuretics, but the thiazide I did not remember. So that's what I'm going to study. I'm going to spend my time on my weaknesses. And that is going to help me build my weaknesses into strengths so that I can perform better on the NCLEX. We have to know what those strengths are in order to study them. And so the skeleton notes, that's one of the big advantages of them, is they help you discover your weaknesses so that you can turn them into strengths with additional study time. All right, so those are some ideas on how to create your own skeleton notes. Now, if you're looking at the ones I had on the screen and you were thinking, oh, I would really like to just have someone make those for me instead of having to create them myself, if you purchase our intense prep program, we provide skeleton notes for you. We provide a lot of learning activities through intense prep. Intense prep is our 6-week intensive tutor-led program that gets you NCLEX ready for good, and it provides you with lots of learning activities. It provides you with tutor support, tutor feedback, and one of those learning activities is skeleton notes. We have a booklet for you that is, I think it's like 150 pages full of skeleton notes. They are interactive for you to do digitally, so you don't need to print them up. Someone said they're expensive to print. You don't need to print them. If you do it through Archer Review Intense Prep, you have a digital version that you can fill in on your computer. You can type right in on your computer and fill those in. You can print it if you want to. You can copy them on a piece of paper. But if you want someone to create those skeleton notes for you, consider Intense Prep. It's a great option. It's a very popular program, and it provides you with some of those learning activities. All right. Okay, a couple of little comments I want to mention in the chat real quick. It says, let's see, think in your first language and fill second in English language. Yeah, that's a great tip. For those of you that English is not your primary language, you've got to take the NCLEX in English. So you've got to have that proficiency in English in order to pass that NCLEX. But you can think about it in your own language first and then translate that into English and practice using your English as you fill out those skeleton notes to get used to that phrasing in English, to get used to that spelling in English, so that when you come to taking the NCLEX, your English might be a little bit more proficient and might help you as, that might help you prepare a little bit better in English. So thank you. I know we've got a few people on the call right now that are in intense prep. If you want more information about that, you're always welcome to reach out to our nursing at Archer Pulse and get some more information. Also, just want to mention real quick before we end our SurePass combo. That's our other most popular option. It includes on-demand videos, QBank, 3-day live review. SurePass is a little bit more self-monitored and self-motivated, where Intense Prep, you are assigned to a tutor and you get that tutor feedback. So two different packages through Archer that really, both of them will get you NCLEX ready. It's just a matter of what works best for you. All right. Any other questions for me before we close out today? Any other questions about skeleton notes or other NCLEX related things? I'm happy to take just a minute to answer those. While you're thinking about any questions, I just want to remind you that Archer Review is here for you across the nursing lifespan. We start out with pre-nursing programs. We help you through nursing school. We help you get that pass on the NCLEX, whether you're a PN or an RN student. And we have programs as you move into your nurse practitioner, if that is the end road for you. So please keep us in mind throughout the nursing journey and know that we are here to support you forever. And so, all right, you guys, I am not seeing any more questions. So hopefully that means that you got your questions answered today. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for being part of the Archer family. And hopefully I will see you guys around Archer in the future, in future sessions. Good luck to all of you as you are studying and preparing for that NCLEX. We are rooting for you.